we are exploring the really complex, often highly surprising correlation between wealth, inequality, and human happiness within our societies.
Right.
We're looking at what actually happens to the fabric of human connection when the gap between the richest and the poorest becomes this, like, massive chasm.
And we are pulling from a sharply contrasting stack of material today to do this.
Yeah, we really are.
On one side, we have modern data analyses and arguments drawn from video essays by Andres Acevedo for the channel The Market Exit. So that's providing this very contemporary, data-driven critique of modern global capitalism.
Yep.
We're also looking at specific epidemiological data on inequality. And then, on the other hand, we are examining this socioeconomic philosophical framework called PROUT.
PRUT, right.
Exactly. It stands for Progressive Utilization Theory, and it was developed by Sri Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar back in the 1950s.
Now, a really quick, clear disclaimer before we get into the weeds here.
Yeah, definitely needed.
The material we are exploring contains some incredibly strong political critiques. I mean, the authors take direct aim at capitalism, they target billionaires, and they really go after political figures across both the left-wing and right-wing spectrums.
They don't pull any punches.
No, they don't. So our role here is just to impartially report on this material.
Right, we are just conveying the ideas, the philosophies and the data presented in the sources.
Exactly. We are not endorsing any specific political side. We're not taking a stance on the ideologies. Our goal is just to synthesize the information so you get the pure, unfiltered concepts to evaluate for yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with what I think is the most fundamental question.
Okay.
It's the one we are culturally conditioned to ask, right? Does having more money actually make a society happier?
That's the million-dollar question, literally.
Right. Because the narrative we are sold every single day on the news is that GDP, gross domestic product, is like the ultimate scorecard of human progress.
Right. Line goes up, country is better.
Exactly. A higher GDP means a better country.
But the data comparing wealth, specifically GDP per capita, against life expectancy and reported happiness levels shows that this assumption is, well, it's only partially true.
Only partially.
Yeah, it depends entirely on where a country is on the wealth spectrum. So for poorer nations, the correlation is absolute. Absolute wealth drastically and immediately improves the quality of life.
Makes sense.
Like take the African nation of Chad. The GDP per capita is around $703.
Wow, okay.
The average life expectancy there is just 53 years. And on a happiness scale of 0 to 10, they score a 4.4.
That's rough.
It is. When a country is in that position, economic growth is literally a matter of life and death. I mean, every additional dollar builds a paved road, or it funds a medical clinic, or, purifies drinking water.
So in that case, wealth directly buys a longer, happier life.
Exactly.
Which, I mean, that makes intuitive sense. You need a baseline of survival.
Right.
But the data does something completely unexpected when you look at the developed world.
It flatlines.
It just levels out.
Yeah, for developed, wealthy nations, the correlation between absolute wealth and happiness completely breaks down. Researchers actually call it the plateau effect.
The plateau effect.
Yeah.
Okay, and the comparison between Sweden, Singapore, and Spain is like the perfect illustration of this from the sources.
Oh yeah, the numbers here are wild.
So get this. Singapore has a GDP per capita that is 59% higher than Sweden's.
59%, that's a massive difference.
Right. They are massively wealthier on paper. But the citizens of Singapore live only 1 year longer on average, and they report being significantly less happy than Swedes.
Less happy despite having way more money.
Exactly. And bring Spain into the mix, and it gets even weirder. Spain's GDP per capita is 40% lower than Sweden's.
So significantly poorer in terms of sheer economic output.
Yep. Yet, Spaniards live slightly longer than Swedes, and just as long as the people in Singapore. Even though Singapore has a GDP per capita that is 166% higher than Spain's.
166%.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So what this shows is that once a society reaches a certain baseline level of wealth, enough to provide solid infrastructure, universal health care, basic education, and sanitation, absolute wealth no longer acts as the engine driving quality of life.
The trend line just goes completely flat.
Exactly.
It's like drinking water.
How do you mean?
Well, when you're dying of thirst, a glass of water is life-changing. Right. But once you've had a gallon, another glass doesn't make you less thirsty. It doesn't make you healthier. It just makes you bloated.
That's a great way to put it.
So is the data essentially suggesting that highly wealthy societies are economically bloated?
That analogy actually holds up really well. The data suggests that once you pass that baseline of absolute wealth, another factor becomes the primary determinant of societal health. And that factor is inequality.
Inequality.
Yes. It is no longer about how much wealth the society has in total. It is entirely about how that wealth is distributed among its people.
Okay, I have to challenge that, though.
Go for it.
A lot of people might listen to this and say, okay, so the executive down the street has a giant yacht, and I only have a used Honda Civic.
Right.
Why should his yacht affect my life expectancy or my mental health?
It's a fair question. To answer that, we really have to look at the epidemiological data presented in the book The Spirit Level.
That's by Kate Pickett and Richard Wilkinson.
Yes, exactly. They mapped out the correlation between income inequality and this vast array of societal health metrics across developed nations.
And what did they find?
They found that as a society's inequality increases, almost every single measurable social metric objectively worsens.
And it wasn't just like one or two isolated things.
No, it's across the board.
Infant mortality rates go up, mental health issues increase, obesity rates rise, educational metrics plummet, like math, literacy, and science scores among teenagers drop in more unequal societies.
It's staggering.
Rates of child conflict, like bullying, increase. Homicide rates go up. Imprisonment rates skyrocket.
And the critical question here is why? Why does the executive's yacht cause the person in the Honda Civic to experience objectively worse health outcomes?
Right. What is the actual mechanism there?
The epidemiological mechanism essentially comes down to chronic stress and evolutionary biology.
Biology.
Yeah. Humans are highly social, hierarchical primates. We are exquisitely sensitive to status.
Oh, I see.
So extreme inequality creates an environment of hyper-competition and pervasive status anxiety.
So it's actually a physiological response to the environment you're in.
Yes, exactly. When you live in a highly unequal society, your brain is constantly processing threats to your social status.
Well,
and this triggers the release of cortisol, which is the stress hormone.
the fight or flight stuff.
Exactly. In short bursts, cortisol is super useful for, escaping a predator. But chronic low-level cortisol elevation, which is what happens when you are constantly stressed about your position in this highly stratified society that breaks down your immune system.
It physically damages you.
Yeah, it damages your cardiovascular system, it alters your metabolism, which is actually a direct link to those higher obesity rates we mentioned.
That makes so much sense.
And it also depletes cognitive bandwidth, which explains the drop in educational outcomes for kids.
And it eats away at the civic bonds holding a community together, too.
It really does.
Like the data shows that the percentage of people who believe that, quote, most people can be trusted, just plummets as inequality rises.
Trust just evaporates.
And to illustrate this, there's this highly revealing anecdote from the sources about a professional who moved from Stockholm, Sweden, to Washington, D.C. to work for a law firm.
Right, I remember this.
So in Sweden, the entry-level salary for a lawyer was around $45,000. In the U.S., that jumped to somewhere between $155,000 and $200,000.
So on paper, you would assume their quality of life just quadrupled.
Exactly. But the reality was completely different. The higher salary didn't translate into a higher standard of living or more happiness.
Why not?
Primarily because of the structural costs of living in a highly unequal society. These American lawyers were carrying an average of $160,000 in student debt.
Just crushing debt.
Meanwhile, in Sweden, the average was just $14,000.
Wow.
And when these American lawyers had children, they got maybe 12 weeks of parental leave and then had to pay $25,000 a year for childcare.
Which is basically a second mortgage.
Right. And in Sweden, parents get 72 weeks of paid leave and pay about $2,000 a year for childcare.
But the anecdote goes even deeper than just the personal finances, doesn't it?
It does. The narrator talked about the profound psychological weight of the environment.
Yeah.
In the U.S., they were surrounded by office cleaners, doormen, and security guards who earned so little that they had to drive for Uber at night and on weekends just to survive.
The visible strain of inequality was just everywhere.
Exactly. But I have to push back on this again, though.
Okay.
Because the classic economic defense here is the whole a rising tide lifts all boats argument.
Right, the standard capitalist defense.
Yeah. The idea is that even if the gap is wider today, the poorest people in a booming economy are fundamentally better off than they were, say, 50 years ago.
Sure.
They might be stressed about status, but they have smartphones, they have microwaves, they have access to this incredible array of cheap consumer goods. Doesn't that absolute material progress count for something?
What's fascinating here is that, yes, absolute material progress certainly counts, but it doesn't neutralize the biological and sociological damage of extreme disparity.
The cheap TVs don't fix the cortisol.
Exactly. The rising tide argument focuses entirely on purchasing power for cheap consumer goods, while completely ignoring the skyrocketing costs of the things that actually secure human dignity.
Like housing and healthcare.
Yes. Housing, healthcare, and education. You might have a nice smartphone, but if a medical emergency bankrupts your family or you can't afford to live within 2 hours of your job, the smartphone doesn't alleviate your chronic stress.
Right.
And extreme inequality breeds resentment. It causes a breakdown of community trust that harms everyone, including the wealthy.
Even the wealthy.
Yeah, living in a gated community might protect you from street crime, but you are still living in a society with lower trust, higher systemic volatility, and a really fractured civic life.
Which means we really need to look at the people creating the gravitational pull that's stretching the society.
Yeah.
Like, where is the line? How much wealth is too much?
Well, researchers actually surveyed people to try and identify the enough line.
The enough line.
Yeah. They asked people how much money they would need to fully flourish in life. Basically, the point where more money won't make a meaningful difference to their happiness.
Okay, what did they say?
In the Netherlands, the consensus was that $1 million is the enough line. In the US, people drew the line higher at around $5 million.
Yeah.
But the vital takeaway is that almost everyone instinctively agrees that a line exists. At some point, enough is enough.
But contrast that with reality. The global median wealth per adult is just $9,197.
Not even close to $1 million.
Not even close. The vast majority of the planet is nowhere near the most modest definition of enough. But at the top, there are roughly 243,000 people globally classified as ultra-high net worth individuals.
Which means they have more than $50 million.
Right. And the billionaires are on a completely different planet. We mentioned Stefan Persson with 20 billion and Elon Musk hovering over 200 billion.
It's astronomical.
Look at the mentality of historic billionaires, too. John D. Rockefeller, when asked by journalists how much money was enough, he famously replied, just a little bit more. There was no limit.
No limit at all. And the framework of PROU approaches this specific mentality not just as an economic issue, but as a deep psychological and spiritual failing.
Really?
Yeah. Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar's text explicitly classified the ambition to become excessively rich by exploiting others as a psychic disease.
Wow, psychic disease. That is a really heavy term to use in an economic context.
It is. The philosophy argues that the human mind inherently possesses an infinite longing. It constantly wants limitless expansion.
Okay, I can see that.
But if that infinite longing does not find proper fulfillment in psychic or spiritual realms, through art, profound human connection, intellectual discovery, self-realization, it gets misdirected.
It turns physical.
Yes. It manifests as a pathological need to hoard physical wealth in the material world. Because you cannot buy infinity, the hoarder just keeps buying more and more, hoping it will eventually satiate an infinite craving.
So the question we are asking on today's deep dive is, well, why? Why do we accept an economic model that requires 500 millennia of human labor to match one lifetime of hoarding?
And we're not just complaining about it today, are we?
Not at all. Today, we are exploring a radically optimistic, highly structured blueprint for our economic and social future. We're diving into a stack of fascinating sources, including economic and philosophical texts.
Specifically, we'll be focusing heavily on PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, along with some really eye-opening contemporary sociological data on wealth inequality.
But I need to jump in with a quick disclaimer right up front, because our sources today touch on politically charged concepts, critiquing both left-wing and right-wing economic models quite intensely. We want to be crystal clear.
Right, about our impartiality.
Exactly. We aren't here to take political sides. Our goal is impartially unpack the ideas presented in these sources so you, the listener, can evaluate them yourself.
And it really is a profound stack of material. What's so compelling is that it completely rejects those traditional political binaries we're so used to arguing over.
Yeah, it steps right out of the usual left versus right shouting match.
It totally does. The thesis here is that we can actually build an economy that doesn't just treat humans as cogs in a machine. It actively works to elevate our physical, mental, and spiritual well-being.
And our sources map this out in other ways, too. The world's richest man today has wealth equivalent to funding 8 entire Manhattan projects.
8 of them. That's absurd.
Or he could privately pay for an army of 100,000 top-tier mercenary soldiers for a whole decade, or fund the entire UN for 14 years.
It's hard to even conceptualize that level of accumulation.
And if you zoom out from just one guy, the top 1% of the global population now owns 43% of all global financial assets.
The physical world is inherently finite.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So what happens if a human being's infinite longing is not guided toward spiritual or psychic growth? It gets misdirected into the physical realm.
The mind tries to satisfy an infinite hunger with finite material objects.
Exactly. The person becomes engaged in accumulating excessive physical wealth. But because physical wealth can never satisfy an infinite spiritual hunger, they just keep hoarding.
And they endlessly deprive others in the process. It really is a sickness then.
It is. If you don't find spiritual peace, you aggressively hoard matter, desperately hoping the next $1 billion will finally make you feel complete.
I hear what you're saying, but let's test that logic against the prevailing global narrative. I can hear people screaming, but hasn't this very system of global capitalism organically reduced poverty?
Ah, yes. The rising tide lifts all boats argument.
Right. You always see that famous graph shared by billionaires on social media. It shows extreme poverty falling from roughly 90% of the global population in 1820 down to something like 10% today.
That graph is very popular, yes.
Doesn't that prove that letting people hoard at the top is effectively building factories, creating jobs, and pulling up the bottom?
That is the dominant justification for the current system. But our sources point to researchers like Jason Hickel and Ha-Joon Chang, who completely dismantle that specific graph.
Really? How do they dismantle it?
They point out a glaring methodological flaw. We simply do not have accurate global poverty data prior to 1981.
Wait, if we don't have the data, what are those 1820 numbers based on?
They are based on sweeping historical assumptions about people's incomes, usually measured in equivalent GDP rather than their actual living requirements.
So it's mostly guesswork.
Worse than guesswork. Before colonial expansion and hyper-industrialization, millions of people lived outside the formal monetary economy.
So they weren't using cash.
Right. They had access to common lands, they grew their own food, they built their own homes. They might have had an income of $0 on a modern ledger, but they were not living in extreme destitution.
So the graph assumes that because a peasant in 1820 didn't have a modern wage, they were starving, which artificially inflates the poverty of the past.
Exactly. And simultaneously, it underestimates the poverty of the present.
How so?
The current threshold for extreme poverty is often cited as living on less than $1.90 a day. Researchers point out that this number is artificially low.
I mean, yeah, $1.90 doesn't buy anything in most places.
In many parts of the world, it doesn't even cover the bare minimum caloric intake for human survival, let alone housing or medicine.
That's horrifying.
According to the deeper analysis in our sources, if you measure absolute numbers of people lacking basic nutritional and housing security, there is arguably more extreme poverty today than ever before.
So the system is generating astronomical wealth at the top, but the narrative that this wealth is eradicating poverty at the bottom is essentially a statistical sleight of hand.
That's exactly what the sources argue, yes.
Okay. If the hoarding is a psychic disease that actively damages society, and it isn't actually ending absolute poverty like the graphs claim, why do our modern social systems seem completely incapable of stopping it?
That is the big question.
You would think democracies would just tax this extreme wealth and redistribute it. Which brings us to a fascinating part of our sources that completely shatters the illusion of how modern taxes actually work.
The Sweden analogy, right?
Yes. I want to introduce this incredible visual analogy our sources use regarding Sweden. Now, Sweden is universally held up as the gold standard of a socialist-leaning democracy.
The perception is high taxes, robust safety nets, low inequality.
Right. It's supposed to be very expensive to be rich and very secure to be poor. But our sources ask us to imagine 100 Lego bricks representing all of Sweden's national wealth.
Okay, 100 bricks.
And imagine 100 Lego figures representing the total population. If wealth were perfectly equal, every figure gets one brick.
But of course, it's not perfectly equal.
Far from it. In reality, the top 10% of those Lego figures own 74 of the 100 Lego bricks.
Leaving just 26 bricks for the other 90 people to fight over, that already challenges the utopian image of the Swedish model.
It does, but the concentration gets much more extreme. If you take the top 1%, just one single Lego figure out of the 100, that one figure holds 35 Lego bricks all by themselves.
Wow. One person has 35 bricks while 90 people are rationing 26 bricks.
Exactly. How does a country famous for high taxation allow one guy to walk away with 35% of the total wealth?
The sources explain this mechanism through what they term a silent tax revolution. To understand how the 1% locked up those 35 Legos, we have to look at the mechanics of taxation.
Okay, break that down for me.
Broadly speaking, a state collects revenue in 4 ways. Consumption taxes on things you buy, salary taxes on the wages you earn, capital income taxes on profits from investments, and wealth or property taxes.
So paying a tax when I buy a loaf of bread, taxes taken out of my biweekly paycheck, taxes on selling corporate stock, or taxes on owning a giant estate.
That's the breakdown. Now, look at who pays which tax. Consumption and salary taxes primarily hit the bottom 90% of the population.
Because the working and middle classes spend almost all of their incoming money just to survive.
Right. They're buying food, gas, clothes, and they derive their income entirely from salaries. The top 10%, and especially the ultra-wealthy, derive very little of their actual wealth from a traditional salary.
Where does it come from then?
Their wealth comes from capital, stocks, corporate equity, real estate empires, and they hold massive accumulated assets.
So if I'm understanding this silent tax revolution, governments kept the taxes on the bread and the paychecks high, but quietly changed the rules for the stocks and the estates.
They systematically flattened, reduced, or entirely abolished them. The sources detail specific historical reforms across Western democracies doing exactly this.
Like what kind of reforms?
Making capital income tax a flat rate instead of progressive, slashing corporate tax rates, creating massive loopholes for borrowing against unsold stock.
Let's put a human face on that mechanism. You have a billionaire senior partner at a massive corporate law firm, and you have his administrative secretary.
Okay, a classic contrast.
The secretary is paying high income tax on every dollar of her salary, and she's paying high consumption tax on every item she buys to live.
Right.
The billionaire partner takes a tiny nominal salary, but his true wealth is in millions of dollars of firm equity and stock portfolios, which are taxed at a fraction of the rate or not at all if he just borrows against them.
The mathematical result is a system where the billionaire partner pays a significantly lower effective percentage of his total wealth in taxes than his secretary does.
That's wild. She might have to work 70 years to earn the gross amount he makes in one single year, yet she bears a heavier relative burden of running the society.
The system isn't broken, you see. It is actively engineered to accelerate the hoarding of the 35 Legos.
So the state lets the billionaire keep the hoard. And to prevent the 90 people with only 26 Legos from revolting, the state issues welfare.
Right. Food stamps, basic dole-outs, subsidized housing.
But PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, has a very specific, very sharp critique of this modern welfare model. It doesn't see welfare as a victory for the working class at all, does it?
Not at all. It sees it as a profound degradation. PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, compares current welfare systems to a prison system or even slavery.
Wait, comparing a food stamp program to slavery is a massive, highly controversial escalation. Walk me through how they justify that kind of language.
I know it sounds extreme.
If someone is starving, giving them a prepackaged meal is saving their life, isn't it?
It is keeping their biological form alive, yes, but it is stripping their human dignity and autonomy.
How so?
When the state says, you cannot earn enough to survive in our rigged economy, so here is your predetermined ration of rice today, here is your assigned housing block tomorrow, the sources argue you are essentially feeding people the way a farmer feeds cattle.
You are removing the freedom of human choice.
Exactly. You are keeping them alive, but you are keeping them perpetually dependent, subservient, and trapped in a state of institutional infancy.
It's utility without humanity. You're just maintaining the biological machinery of the underclass so they don't disrupt the billionaires.
It treats the symptom of starvation while institutionalizing the disease of dependency. If the current system treats the economy as a massive machine that just uses people either as cogs or as cattle, we need a foundational pivot.
What if we designed an economy for people?
That is the exact question.
Which brings us to the foundational concepts of PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory. conceptualized by Sri Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar,
Yes.
to actually design an economy for people. The sources argue we have to completely destroy our current philosophy about who owns the world. And the absolute bedrock of this new theory is the concept of the universal family.
The sources introduce a specific Sanskrit term here. It's called dayabhaga.
Dayabhaga, what does that mean?
It refers to a joint family property system. It's an ancient legal concept where the property belongs to the entire extended family collectively, not to any single individual.
Okay, I follow.
Sarkar elevates this concept to a cosmic scale. The philosophical premise is elegant. The supreme consciousness is the father, the supreme operative principle is the mother, and the entire physical universe is the homeland.
So every single human being, every living creature, is literally a citizen of this universe with birthrights.
Because we are all members of this one universal family, the entire wealth of the universe, the land, the minerals, the water, is the common patrimony of all living beings.
Meaning no one individual naturally owns any of it.
Exactly.
Let's use the pantry analogy from the text, because it makes this abstract philosophy incredibly visceral. Imagine a normal family of 5 living in a house.
Okay.
The parents go out and fill the kitchen pantry with groceries based on the financial capacity of the whole household. Now imagine one sibling waits until everyone is asleep.
Right, they sneak in.
They go into the pantry, use physical intimidation or some clever lock mechanism, and hoard 90% of the food in their own personal bedroom, leaving the other 4 siblings to starve the next morning.
In a family unit, we would instantly recognize that behavior as deeply pathological. We would say, you are sick and you are hurting your brothers and sisters. It would be entirely antisocial.
But when capitalists do the exact same thing on a global scale, hoarding the land, the fresh water, the technological patents, they write books about it and call themselves visionaries.
Yeah, they say, I earned this with my superior talent and labor. If my siblings want food, they should work harder.
Which ignores the fundamental physical reality that the volume of commodities on Earth is finite. But the requirement for those commodities is common to everyone. Everyone needs to eat.
The sources state unequivocally that private ownership of the Earth's core resources isn't a natural law, it's a legal loophole.
Created by selfish opportunists, right?
Yes, to exploit finite resources for their own self-aggrandizement, enabled by that psychic disease we discussed earlier.
Okay, I am going to push back hard right here. Because if you treat the world as a joint family where nobody privately owns the wealth, and the pantry belongs to everyone equally,
I know you're going to say.
how is this not just classic communism? If the universe is a joint pantry, and my neighbor decides to just lay on the couch all day, under this model, I still have to feed him.
It's a very common reaction.
That sounds exactly like the absolute identicality that historically crushes all human innovation and motivation.
It is the most natural assumption to make when you hear the phrase common patrimony, but it is entirely incorrect according to PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory.
Oh, really?
In fact, the theory heavily critiques the forced equality of communism just as intensely as the hoarding of capitalism. And this is where the genius of the framework really shines. It introduces the natural law of diversity.
The Sanskrit term from the text for this is Vaisitriyam Prakta Dharma, right?
Yes, diversity is the ultimate law of nature. The sources point out a simple biological fact. There are roughly 7.9 billion people on the planet today, and every single one of them has a completely unique thumbprint.
That's true. Identicality simply does not exist in the natural world.
No 2 leaves on a tree are exactly the same. No 2 human minds work exactly the same way.
So giving everyone the exact same outcome is biologically and psychologically flawed from the start.
Precisely.
The text uses a great thought experiment for this. If you take 5 people today and you force absolute equality upon them, you hand them all the exact same amount of money, the exact same clothes, the exact same house.
What happens just 1 week later?
Yeah, exactly. A week later, you will have 5 completely different financial situations. One person might have invested their money into tools to build something. Another might have spent it entirely on leisure.
A third might have given half of it away to a friend. A fourth might have gambled it. Because human habits, choices, intellectual capacities, and desires are inherently beautifully diverse.
So the texts say that any political ideology promising to make everyone exactly equal is simply fooling us.
Forcing identicality is fundamentally unscientific. It goes against the very grain of human nature.
It really does.
If you tell an incredibly hardworking, innovative person that they will receive the exact same reward as someone who contributes absolutely nothing, you crush the human spirit. You stagnate society.
This is why PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, is fundamentally misunderstood by both the extreme left and the extreme right, isn't it?
Absolutely. The leftists think PROUT allows too much capitalism because it actively demands that we reward merit. And the right-wing capitalists think PROUT is communist because it aggressively limits hoarding.
It's a synthetic approach. It acknowledges two conflicting human truths. Truth one, humans have a deep psychological need to be unique and to be tangibly rewarded for their distinct efforts.
And truth two.
The human mind is also fundamentally averse to gross, unbridled inequality that leaves their fellow family members starving.
So well said.
But how does PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, practically balance that? You can't just say, we value diversity, and then shrug, well, the billionaires keep the 35 Lego bricks. What is the actual mechanism to enforce this?
It balances it through rigid structural economic limits tied to a dynamic ratio. The sources mention that progressive economists have long experimented with fixing the ratio of maximum to minimum earnings.
Like a 10-to-1 ratio within an economy.
Yes, exactly.
Walk me through the mechanics of a 10-to-1 ratio.
It means that the absolute highest earner in a society, the brilliant brain surgeon, the visionary tech inventor, the top-tier architect, cannot legally accumulate wealth or earn an income that is more than 10 times what the lowest earning basic laborer makes.
So if the guaranteed minimum floor for a janitor is $50,000 a year, the maximum cap for the top CEO is $500,000 a year.
Exactly. And this isn't done by just politely asking CEOs to take a pay cut.
Right, because that would never happen.
It's done through a restructuring of tax laws, perhaps 100% tax on anything over that 500K mark, and through reorganizing businesses into cooperatives where the workers democratically vote on the wage ratio.
It prevents the psychic disease of unbridled exploitation while still heavily honoring and incentivizing human uniqueness.
Exactly. Earning 10 times more than the baseline is still a massive, highly motivating reward for extraordinary effort, but it doesn't allow you to buy your own private army or hoard 35% of the nation's wealth.
That structural limit makes so much sense. But it inevitably leads us to the next massive question.
Which is,
if we aren't giving everyone the exact same amount of wealth, and we are letting the brilliant surgeon earn 10 times more than the baseline, how do we ensure that the people at the one end of that ratio actually survive and thrive?
this is where we dive into Sutras 5.9 and 5.11 from the texts. These sutras focus on the absolute guarantee of life, not through welfare handouts, but through a concept called purchasing capacity.
We really need to draw a huge underline beneath that phrase, purchasing capacity.
It's fundamental.
Because the texts mandate that the minimum requirements of a specific age, which they define as food, clothing, housing, medical care, and education, must be guaranteed to all citizens by constitutional law.
But as we discussed with the prison analogy earlier, this is absolutely not charity. Giving someone a handout treats a symptom while maintaining the disease of dependency.
Right. PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, demands that society ensures every single individual has the purchasing capacity to buy their own minimum requirements in a free market.
Let's use some real-life numbers to illustrate how purchasing capacity replaces simple charity.
Okay, let's do the math.
Let's say a board of economists, not politicians looking for votes, but actual economists, calculates that the absolute minimum cost of living in a certain city is 3,000 rupees a month.
And that covers decent groceries, basic rent, clothes, and health needs.
Yes. Under PROUT, the economic system must be engineered so that every worker, every retiree, and every specially abled person unable to work receives at least double that amount, so 6,000 rupees.
And the mechanism for delivering this isn't a government dole-out. For the able-bodied, it is delivered through guaranteed employment with a legally enforced minimum wage that meets that requirement.
And for the retired or those physically unable to work, it is provided through a guaranteed robust pension.
And the why here is crucial. Why go through the trouble of ensuring high wages and pensions instead of just having the state issue standardized government housing and government food blocks?
Because purchasing capacity grants the dignity of choice. That is what separates a free human from cattle.
Exactly. If you have the 6,000 rupees, you get to choose if you want chapati or rice for dinner. You choose the style of your clothes. You choose whether you want an apartment downtown or a small house near the woods.
You remain an active, self-determining participant in society, supporting local farmers and artisans, rather than a passive ward of the state waiting for your ration.
It's brilliant.
And the framework doesn't just establish this floor and leave it there. Sutra 5.11 emphasizes that this minimum standard of living must constantly increase.
Raising the floor is the true defining indication of a society's vitality, isn't it?
Yes. A vibrant society constantly pushes the baseline up. A decaying society stagnates or lets inflation eat away at the floor.
But there's a really brilliant nuance in how they define that rising standard. Because under capitalism, progress usually means producing more plastic consumer junk for people to buy.
PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, defines progress very differently.
Yeah. As science and technology improve, the goal isn't just to produce more commodities. The goal is to reduce working hours.
Under current systems, if a new AI or robotic system makes a factory twice as efficient, the owner fires half the workers and pockets the extra profit. The technology creates unemployment and misery.
But under PROUT, if technology makes production twice as efficient, society reduces the work week for everyone from 40 hours to 20 hours, with no loss in purchasing capacity.
The sources explicitly define true comfort, not as owning luxury brands, but as possessing a free mind, a stress-free mind.
True wealth is having the free time, combined with the purchasing capacity, to actually articulate your specific taste in life, to pursue arts, to play sports, to read philosophy.
If you are grinding 60 hours a week just to survive, you have zero mental space to explore your higher human potential.
So true.
By guaranteeing purchasing capacity and actively reducing work hours through technological efficiency, society is literally freeing the human mind.
So the floor is guaranteed, and it's constantly rising. Everyone has what they need, plus extra, and they have the dignity to choose how to spend it. But what happens to the surplus wealth of society?
The surplus.
Let's say I go to medical school for a decade, endure grueling residencies, and become a brilliant cardiovascular surgeon who saves dozens of lives a week. Am I making the same guaranteed minimum as someone doing very basic, low-stress labor?
Not at all. And this is where PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, completely breaks from the communist model of absolute egalitarianism.
Okay, Sutra 510, right?
Yes, which states, the surplus wealth should be distributed among meritorious people according to the degree of their merit.
I love the analogy the texts use for this. It's the bicycle versus the motor vehicle.
It perfectly illustrates how merit is rewarded practically. Imagine an era where a bicycle is considered the baseline minimum requirement for conveyance for a common citizen.
So everyone in society has the purchasing power to easily buy a bicycle.
Right. But a physician who needs to respond to medical emergencies rapidly across town requires a motor vehicle. Society must provide that meritorious person with the purchasing capacity to acquire that car.
Not as a luxury to flaunt their superiority over the bicycle owners, but as a necessary tool, a just reward that allows them to provide even greater service to society.
The communist maxim of serve according to your capacity and earn according to your necessity sounds very pleasing in a poem, but the sources say that in the real world, it yields no results. It stagnates.
You have to tangibly reward skill, massive effort, and merit.
And this is a massive paradigm shift we have to unpack. We have to completely reframe how society defines value and merit.
Because currently, under extreme capitalism, society only recognizes what the texts call utility value, right?
Exactly.
Let's define utility value for a second. That's essentially objective, measurable, wealth-generating output. If your labor generates corporate profit or builds a bridge or writes software code, you have utility value.
But PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, demands that society also honor, respect, and tangibly compensate existential value.
Which is the subjective, deeply human value that doesn't necessarily show up on a corporate balance sheet, but is the actual glue that holds human civilization together.
The sources give two incredibly poignant examples of existential value being ignored by utility-obsessed systems. The first is a mother.
Yeah, that example really hit me. Under the current capitalist system, the massive, exhausting, daily unpaid labor of a mother investing her time, empathy, and love into raising a child has zero economic utility value.
GDP doesn't care if you hug your kid.
Exactly. Yet, her love literally shapes the psychological confidence, the morality, and the healthy growth of a future citizen. That existential value is astronomical to the survival of the human race.
The second example the texts highlight is a retired teacher. This is an individual who spent 40 years shaping the minds of scientists, judges, engineers, and artists.
But the moment they retire because their direct, measurable utility to the capitalist machine has ended, they're often discarded.
They are isolated in underfunded care facilities. They are treated like junk machinery that has fully depreciated.
The text calls that treatment inhumane and unpsychological. It actively disintegrates social cohesion. If young people see the elderly being discarded, it creates a culture of immense anxiety and selfishness.
PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory argues that these individuals still hold immense existential value. Their lived wisdom, their historical perspective, and their mere presence provide confidence and guidance to the new generation.
A truly progressive society honors that existential value rather than just waiting for their breath to run out because they aren't producing capital anymore.
Exactly.
So how does a society actually pay a retired teacher or a full-time caregiver for the existential value? How does that work mechanically?
It shifts away from pure GDP-based wages. Society provides robust community stipends, social dividends, and creates advisory boards where elders are financially compensated for their mentorship.
Care work is recognized as vital labor and compensated through the guaranteed minimum purchasing capacity we discussed earlier. You don't have to clock in at a factory to be recognized as contributing to the universal family.
It is a totally different, vastly more humane way of looking at a human life.
It really is. But to fund this incredible system, guaranteed minimums that keep rising, rewarding utility merit with higher ratios, and financially honoring existential merit society is going to need massive resources.
Huge resources, yes.
It needs a highly dynamic, incredibly efficient economy. Which brings us to a concept that might initially sound a little terrifying to our listeners. We need to talk about your savings account.
Yes. Sutra 512. This is the part of the framework that often causes panic if it isn't explained properly.
What does the sutra say?
It states, accumulation of wealth without the clear permission of society is akartavya, which translates to, it should not be done.
Let me stop you right there. If I work hard, pay my taxes, and save my own money from my own paycheck, PROUT considers that a sin. That sounds terrifying.
I know, without permission of society sounds incredibly alarming to a modern ear.
Am I not allowed a savings account? Is the state going to seize my emergency fund?
Not at all. The text clarifies a critical mechanical distinction. The Sanskrit word used is sanchaya, which refers specifically to stagnant, dead wealth.
Stagnant wealth? Like what?
It's hoarding cash in a way that literally freezes it out of the economy.
So we aren't talking about my checking account. We're talking about a billionaire stuffing hundreds of millions into an offshore shell company where it just sits, doing absolutely nothing for human progress.
Exactly. Or even on a smaller scale, if everyone in a country of over 1 billion people hoards massive amounts of stagnant cash under their mattresses, the economy literally sinks.
Because the money isn't moving. It isn't paying wages, it isn't building infrastructure, it isn't funding research.
Right. So society guided by economic experts, not corrupt politicians, calculates a generous safety net amount that everyone is fully entitled to hold.
Let's use the math from earlier. If the monthly expenses are $3,000 and your guaranteed income is $6,000, maybe the economists say everyone can freely hold $12,000 or $20,000 in liquid, untouchable cash for contingencies.
A busted water heater, a sudden trip, no questions asked.
But what happens to the surplus beyond that safety net? Say you've saved $120,000 over years of meritorious work. PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, doesn't just seize it, does it?
No, it creates massive structural incentives to redirect and mobilize that wealth. It wants to transition individual stagnant savings into productive cooperative investments.
Walk me through how cooperative investments work, because this is very different from just buying stock in a mega corporation on Wall Street.
If you keep $120K in a debt account for 10 years, it's just $120K slowly dying to inflation. Under this model, you are incentivized to invest that money into productive cooperative enterprises.
Oh, like buying shares in the very place where you work.
Yes, or in local community agricultural and industrial co-ops. A cooperative is a business owned and democratically managed by the workers themselves, not by distant shareholders who just want to squeeze the labor for profit.
Which is brilliant for the listener to consider. This makes the entire economy omni-dynamic.
Very dynamic.
Your money doesn't just sit there. It rolls into your local cooperative, it funds the purchase of better machinery, it creates more wealth, and it pays you dividends as an owner-worker.
And it benefits the entire society simultaneously by funding actual production and innovation. The economic principle is beautifully simple. When money rolls, it creates more money.
Stagnation is the enemy of a progressive economy. A rolling economy guarantees purchasing capacity.
Exactly.
So we are maximizing the utilization of money to make sure nobody starves.
Huh.
But the sources go much, much further than just money. They demand the maximum utilization of the entire universe, including human potential.
Yes. Let's dive into the core philosophy of balancing the physical, mental, and spiritual realms.
This holistic balance is covered in Sutras 513, 514, and 515, right?
Yes. The text categorized the entire universe into three fundamental levels of existence: the crude or mundane matter, which is stula, the subtle or sensory matter, which is suksma, and the causal or primordial factors called karana.
Let's ground those terms. Stula is the gross matter we can touch, weigh, and see. Water, earth, lumber, the physical weight of heat.
Suksma involves the subtle senses like sound, smell, touch, and the deeper atomic structure of things. And karana is the causal level, the hidden frameworks like electrical fields, magnetic fields, the ionosphere.
The theory dictates that humanity must maximally utilize all of these resources, from farming the crude earth to harnessing the subtle energies of the ionosphere for the welfare of all.
With highly rational, sustainable distribution. But more importantly, this three-tiered approach applies directly to human potential.
Meaning, we must utilize the physical, metaphysical, and spiritual potentialities of both individuals and the collective society.
And this is where PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, absolutely skewers our current socioeconomic system. Currently, we operate on pure social Darwinism, survival of the fittest.
It's a ruthless competition where only the aggressive, the physically strong, or the financially cunning survive.
Which the texts argue degrades humans to animalistic behavior. If we are forced to spend our entire lives just fighting for biological survival, we are not using our higher wisdom. We are ignoring the suksma and karana aspects of ourselves.
Let's think about this practically. Imagine an individual who has immense metaphysical and spiritual potential. They are a deep thinker, highly empathetic, a visionary philosopher, or a natural healer.
Okay.
Under our current system, if they don't also possess cutthroat business acumen or the ability to market themselves ruthlessly on social media, they are forced into the physically grinding struggle for existence.
They might end up working 80 hours a week, moving boxes in a warehouse just to pay exorbitant rent. And that is a tragic, immense waste of human resource.
It really is.
The texts argue that society's managers, its educators and community leaders, should actively evaluate individuals and guide them. If someone has rare spiritual and metaphysical gifts, they should be supported as educators, visionaries, or judges.
You don't put them in a brutal physical struggle for existence, because that degrades their rare talents. You are using a supercomputer as a doorstop.
Exactly. Society should take maximum spiritual and intellectual service from them, and less physical service. Conversely, someone with immense physical stamina and intellectual drive for engineering, but less inclination for deep spiritual philosophy, takes on different roles.
They lead the industrial cooperatives. It's about a harmonious, well-balanced utilization of exactly what makes each unique thumbprint special.
And we must look at history to understand why achieving this balance is so utterly crucial for our survival. The texts offer a striking, highly critical view of the Industrial Revolution and the era of global expansion.
They specifically point to historical figures like Vasco da Gama and Christopher Columbus in the late 1490s as the kickoff points for a disastrous era, right?
Yes. May 1498 for da Gama reaching India, October 1492 for Columbus reaching the Americas. The driving force behind those expeditions wasn't a noble quest for human unity.
It was the desperate pursuit of wealth, spices, gold, and territory. It was purely stula-crude material accumulation.
It completely neglected the spiritual and metaphysical dimensions of humanity, leading to centuries of brutal colonization and extraction.
The texts argue that this historical trajectory, led by what they term selfish intellects, is exactly what brought us to our current planetary crossroads.
The climate crisis, the extreme inequality, the threat of nuclear annihilation.
These are the direct results of hundreds of years of aggressively utilizing the crude physical world while completely ignoring spiritual morality, empathy, and collective welfare.
But I want to make sure we don't paint this philosophy as some kind of anti-technology back-to-the-woods movement. Sutra 516 explicitly states that utilization must be progressive.
They embrace advanced technology. They embrace artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. The texts are clear: using outdated technology in an age of science is not progress, it's foolishness. The physical energy a person uses to swing a single hammer should be replaced by advanced robotics that swings 10 hammers.
AI shouldn't be feared as a job killer. In a capitalist system, AI causes mass unemployment and desperation because the billionaires own the AI and hoard the profits.
But under PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, AI is used to free up human time. The cooperative owns the AI, production increases, and everyone's work week drops to 15 hours while their purchasing capacity rises.
So technology becomes the great liberator, allowing the masses to engage in that higher metaphysical and spiritual work we just talked about.
Exactly.
But to actually implement an economy that balances these profound forces, an economy that uses AI to liberate people rather than starve them, an economy that limits billionaires to a 10-to-1 ratio and guarantees purchasing capacity instead of prison ration welfare, we need a completely different kind of leadership.
Because, let's be honest, our current crop of politicians who spend half their time fundraising from billionaires clearly aren't going to get it done.
And that reality leads us to the ultimate culmination of these social dynamics, the concept of Sadvipra leadership.
This part of the deep dive is a direct call to the youth. To the young people listening today who look at the burning world, who look at the 500,000-year retail salary gap, and want to become ethical leaders.
The sources define a Sadvipra as a completely new category of leader. It is someone who is simultaneously spiritually elevated, highly intelligent, physically courageous, and deeply, unshakably moral.
The core argument here is about the cyclical nature of power. The texts explain that social control cannot safely be left in the hands of any single unbalanced group.
History proves this over and over, doesn't it?
It does. If leaders are only physically courageous but lack intellect, they become militaristic tyrants. If they're purely intellectual but lack morality, they build exploitative bureaucratic systems that trap the poor.
If they are ruthlessly wealthy, they just hoard the 35 Legos and let everyone else fight over the scraps.
So social control must be in the hands of moral Sadvipras, those who possess the bravery of a warrior, the intellect of a scholar, the administrative skill of a merchant, and the empathy of a spiritual guide to guide ethical economic policy.
For the next generation aiming to step into this Sadvipra leadership, the texts outlined very specific, demanding principles.
The very first foundational requirement is that you must cultivate a genuine, profound love for humanity.
The texts state plainly, economic problems have only one solution: genuine love for humanity.
You can read volumes of Marxist or capitalist economic theory, you can memorize all the data, but if you lack basic, honest sympathy for your fellow human beings, your policies will inevitably become cruel.
I want to highlight the pilgrimage analogy the texts use to illustrate this genuine love because it is incredibly vivid and beautiful. They ask the reader, what is a true society?
Is it just a group of millions of people who happen to live within the same geographic borders, paying taxes to the same government? No. A true society is a group of people going on a pilgrimage together.
Imagine that scene vividly. A diverse group of travelers is walking together through a treacherous landscape toward a shared, cherished goal. Suddenly, one of the pilgrims falls ill. They contract cholera.
Does the rest of the group just look at them, shrug, mutter survival of the fittest, and leave them by the side of the road to die while they keep marching?
No. That would be inconceivable in a real community. They stop the march, they gather their medicines and cure the person.
If the person is permanently weakened, the stronger pilgrims literally carry them on their shoulders. If someone runs out of food, the others immediately share their rations.
They actively, happily compensate for each other's weaknesses.
That is the ultimate essence of human cooperation. It expands the human mind by striking down the artificial barriers of meanness, prejudice, and extreme, isolating individualism. A society is only a society if it moves together.
And the sources offer a really challenging, counterintuitive piece of advice for these young future leaders regarding the current billionaires, the capitalists.
Because the natural instinct for many young, passionate activists looking at the staggering inequality is just to hate them, to bash them, to write angry posts about them, and to want to violently throw them away.
But the texts argue that pure hate is the wrong political culture. It's toxic to the Sadvipra mind.
The capitalists are acting out a system fault. They are caught in the grip of that psychic disease of endless accumulation. The goal of a true Sadvipra leader isn't to destroy them, but to mentor them.
Mentor a billionaire? That sounds almost absurd. How do you mentor someone who has 100,000 times more wealth than you?
You do it by shifting the paradigm of what society values. First, you recognize the incredible, genuine acumen. Capitalists know how to organize complex supply chains, how to create massive job networks, how to manage vast global resources.
That is a real valuable skill. You recognize that talent. Then you inspire them. You change the societal reward system so that public prestige and honor come not from hoarding the most wealth, but but from providing the greatest service.
You show them that curing their psychic disease through philanthropy and cooperative building is more fulfilling than buying a fifth super yacht.
Once they are mentored to work for the society beyond themselves, their immense organizational skills can actually set a powerful example for all of humanity.
It is a radical, almost terrifying empathy. It seeks to heal the whole system, the billionaire and the starving worker alike, rather than just flipping the board and changing who is on top.
It is a holistic, progressive utilization of every single human being's potential. No one is discarded.
Okay, we have covered an immense, staggering amount of ground today. We started with the mathematical absurdity of a 500,000-year retail salary, and we journeyed through the illusion of the silent tax revolution.
We explored how the dignity of purchasing capacity must replace the slavery of welfare doleouts.
We unpacked the universal family, the necessity of rewarding merit through a 10-to-1 ratio, redirecting stagnant savings into dynamic cooperatives, balancing our physical and spiritual selves, all the way to the moral courage required of a Sadvipra.
It is a breathtakingly comprehensive vision. It proves that we do not have to accept the current reality as the final stage of human economic evolution. An economy designed for people is mechanically, mathematically, and psychologically possible.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Look around your own life tomorrow. Think about your own community right now. Your neighborhood, your workplace, your city.
Are you operating like a group of isolated competitors, desperately fighting over the 26 Lego bricks the 1% left behind on the floor? Or are you operating like a group of pilgrims on a journey, willing to carry those who fall ill and share the resources you have?
How do we individually take the very first step toward that pilgrimage?
That is the defining question of our time.
To make this world a better place for all to live with happiness and justice, we highly urge you to keep the best of your discussions progressive and optimistic. Dive deeper.
Know more about neo-humanism and PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory? If this concept of a universal family resonated with you, there is an entire global community already having these conversations and building these frameworks.
You can actually join a PROUT study circle in your area to start actively shaping this future.
The intellectual and practical resources are already out there for those ready to take on the mantle of leadership.
Absolutely. Go join the YouTube channels at Sadvipra's Movement and at New Human Project. Firm up your understanding of scientific spirituality and neo-humanism, which provides a profoundly new ethics for the future humanity.
And for the absolute authenticity of the original knowledge regarding everything we discussed today, do visit Ananda Marga Publication and email ampsbooks@gmail.com.
Thank you so much for joining us on this massive paradigm-shifting deep dive. Keep asking the big questions, stay compassionate to your fellow pilgrims, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you, and take care.